Imagine this, a freezing morning on the edge of the city. A homeless man, beard scruffy, clothes worn thin, is sitting quietly on a broken bench. Suddenly, vroom, a convoy of sleek black cars rolls to a stop right in front of him. Engines rumble, doors swing open, and men in suits step out one by one. The homeless man blinks, stunned. People walking by stop, whispering, staring. What on earth is happening? Why are all these powerful-looking people here for him? And then, a little girl in a bright yellow coat steps forward from the middle of the group. But to understand why this moment changed everything, we have to go back, just 24 hours earlier. The man's name? David Walker. Once upon a time, David wasn't homeless. He was an engineer, a father, a man who had built a steady life. But tragedy, one loss after another, broke his world apart. His wife passed away suddenly. Bills stacked higher than hope. And eventually, he ended up on the streets, invisible to the world. Most people walked past him like he was nothing but air. Some tossed insults instead of coins. But David, he never complained. He just sat quietly with his worn backpack and a small cardboard sign. I don't need much. Just kindness. On that same cold day, when most rushed by without looking, a little girl stopped. She couldn't have been more than 8 years old. She looked up at him with big, curious eyes and asked softly, "Sir, are you hungry?" David smiled, tired but gentle. "A little. But I'll be okay." The girl hesitated, then pulled off her small silver ring, the one clearly too valuable for a child to just hand away. "Then take this. My daddy says this ring is for brave people, and you look brave." David froze. This wasn't just a toy ring. It gleamed under the winter sun. He shook his head. "I can't take that, sweetheart. That's yours." But the girl pressed it into his hand anyway. "You'll need it more than me." What David didn't know, that single moment, her small act of kindness, would trigger the convoy of black cars that arrived the next morning, and reveal a truth about him no one ever expected. But here's the real question. Why would a millionaire's daughter give her most precious ring to a homeless stranger? Keep watching, because what happened next will leave you speechless. The morning after the little girl handed David the ring, something extraordinary happened. David woke up shivering in his usual spot, clutching the silver ring tightly in his palm. He had barely slept, turning the small piece of jewelry over and over in his hand, wondering why a child would give away something so precious. Suddenly, the quiet street was filled with the low rumble of engines. Not just one car, but several. David sat up, confused, as a line of black luxury cars slowly pulled up in front of him. Their glossy surfaces reflected the winter sun like mirrors. Doors opened, and men in sharp suits stepped out with straight backs and earpieces buzzing faintly in their ears. Passers-by stopped in their tracks. "Who are they here for?" one whispered. "They must be guarding some VIP," another guessed. But then, to everyone's shock, all eyes turned to David. Focus on David. David blinked, clutching the ring in his pocket. His first instinct: run. He wasn't used to being the center of attention, especially not from people who looked like they belonged in boardrooms or palaces. Then, from the middle car, a tall man in a long coat stepped forward. His presence was commanding, his eyes sharp, but his expression softened the moment he spotted David. "You," the man said firmly, pointing straight at him. "We've been looking for you." Gasps spread through the crowd. David shook his head, baffled. "Me? You must have the wrong person." The suited man shook his head slowly. "No mistake. You have something that belongs to us. The ring comes into play." David's hand instinctively closed around the ring in his pocket. His heart raced. This little girl gave it to me yesterday." The man's eyes widened. He stepped closer, lowering his voice but with a weight that sent chills down David's spine. "Do you have any idea what that ring means?" David pulled it out hesitantly, and the sunlight caught the gem's edge, scattering colors across the sidewalk. The crowd gasped. It was no toy. This was a ring of immense value, possibly priceless. Before David could answer, the door of the central car opened again, and the little girl stepped out. Her bright yellow coat stood out like a beacon among the dark suits. She ran forward, her face lighting up. "Daddy! That's him. That's the man I told you about." David's breath caught. "Daddy!" He turned slowly, and realized the tall man in the coat wasn't just anyone. He was someone powerful. Someone who looked at David not with suspicion, but with recognition. "You may not remember me," the man said slowly, "but years ago, you saved my life." David froze. The world seemed to spin around him. The ring, the cars, the men in suits, none of it made sense. But the truth was about to come crashing down. and nothing would ever be the same again. So who exactly is this powerful man? And how could a forgotten homeless stranger have once saved his life? Stay with me, because the next part will unravel a secret that will change everything. The man in the long coat stepped closer, his voice low but powerful. You really don't remember, do you? He said, studying David with searching eyes. David shook his head, still gripping the ring. I don't even know your name. The man exhaled slowly, then gave a small nod to one of his guards. The guard produced a folder and handed it over. Inside was an old newspaper clipping, its edges yellowed with time. David's eyes scanned the headline. Young businessman saved after highway crash, mystery stranger vanishes. The scene faded into memory. Years earlier, a violent storm raged across a lonely highway. A car had skidded, flipped, and burst into flames. And while most drivers sped past, one man, a younger David, had pulled over, yanked open the crumpled door, and dragged an unconscious driver to safety. The driver? The very man standing before him now. Back to present. David's mouth fell open. That was you. The man nodded. I was no one back then, just a struggling entrepreneur, buried in debt, barely holding my company together. But because you saved me, I had a second chance. I built my empire. I built this life. And I swore, if I ever found you, I would repay the debt. Gasps rose from the onlookers. Some even pulled out their phones to record. David's voice cracked. I don't need repayment. I just did what anyone would have done. The little girl tugged at her father's sleeve. Daddy, can't we help him? He's the nicest man I ever met. Please. Her innocent plea pierced the heavy silence. The powerful man's gaze softened, his jaw tightening with decision. David, he said firmly, you don't belong on the streets. From this moment on, you are under my protection. I won't let the man who gave me my life live without dignity. He gestured, and his guards immediately stepped forward, not to intimidate, but to assist. They offered David a hand, helping him up as though he were royalty. For the first time in years, David felt seen. But before David could even process this overwhelming turn of events, the man added, And this ring you hold, it was my wife's. My daughter gave it to you because she saw something pure in you, something that reminded her of her mother. It's not just valuable, it's sacred. David's hands trembled. He stared at the ring, then at the little girl smiling at him, then back at the man who owed him everything. Tears welled in his eyes. Why me? Why now? The man's reply sent chills through the crowd. Because fate has a way of finding those who deserve redemption. And David, your redemption starts today. But what will this redemption look like? Will David's life truly change? Or will the shadows of his past come back to haunt him? Stay tuned, because the final part will deliver a twist you won't forget. Later that evening, David found himself standing at the gates of a sprawling mansion, one he'd only ever seen in magazines. The powerful man, whose name was revealed as Alexander Pierce, welcomed him inside. The girl skipped happily, holding David's hand like they were old friends. The homeless man who once shivered on the sidewalks now sat at a grand dining table, staring at chandeliers and polished silverware. He almost felt out of place, but Alexander's words broke the silence. David, you saved my life. Tonight, I give you yours back. Alexander slid a folder across the table. Inside were deeds and documents, ownership papers to an apartment, job contracts, and even medical coverage. This is not charity, Alexander said firmly. It's justice. You gave me a second chance. Now I give you one. David's hands shook as he flipped through the documents. Tears streamed down his face. I don't know what to say. The little girl smiled. Just say yes, mister. David broke down, sobbing openly as years of struggle seemed to collapse in a flood of relief. For so long, he whispered, I thought I was invisible. I thought the world forgot me. And now this. Alexander placed a hand on his shoulder. No one who saves lives is ever forgotten, David. Fate just needed time to remind you. The crowd of staff and guards who had once looked at him with suspicion now watched with respect. For the first time, David wasn't a beggar, wasn't a shadow on the street. He was a man restored. In the days that followed, David moved into his new apartment. He got a steady job within Alexander's company, helping others who had fallen on hard times. His story began spreading online, inspiring thousands. People who once passed him by without a glance now recognized him as a symbol of kindness rewarded. And the ring? He kept it, polished and shining, as a reminder of the day his life turned around. Not as a possession, but as a promise to never give up hope. One evening, David walked past the same street corner where he once begged. A homeless man sat there, head down. David approached, knelt, and handed him food and money. "Don't lose hope, friend," he said softly. "Sometimes, miracles come when you least expect them." The man looked up, surprised, as David walked away, strong, confident, and no longer invisible. Narrator's final words. Life has a way of testing us in the darkest hours. But sometimes, in the unlikeliest of moments, compassion lights the path to redemption. David's story is proof. One act of kindness can ripple through time, turning despair into destiny. If this story touched your heart, don't just keep it to yourself. Share it, like it, and subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us of the hope we all need. Because you never know, the next twist of fate might be yours.